I'm not actually okay with that. So if we need to actually interview somewhere else, that's the point. They're taking the time to frame the narrative, and that doesn't work for me.
Ms. Baker, I offered to make the opening comments because I reached out to you to invite you to a meeting.
You did, in
We
order
had
to
a
point your
meeting,
fingers at my son.
and we're here at the Alachua County Sheriff's Office following the meeting that we had in my office. Ms. Baker was here along with several of her friends, and we had a conversation. I'll turn it over to Ms. Baker so she can say what she'd like to say.
Okay. Those were her opening remarks. We came here. So as when I spoke with Sheriff Darnell, I actually was hopeful that we'd actually be able to get somewhere with this particular conversation after a phone conversation. In the middle of the night or later on in the evening, she okayed for her communications department to actually post a social media video embarrassing and humiliating my son, where all fingers were actually pointed at him, where they stated that I misrepresented facts, which is actually not factual information, and then had the audacity to tell me that they were going to actually keep the video up. When I asked her who was her audience, she stated she doesn't know who the audience was. It was just the general public. When I asked her what did she think my response would be to the video, she stated she didn't know what my response was. It was just important in order to get the information out. I stated clearly to Sheriff Darnell the responses to the actual post on the social media video actually proved and conveyed my point. I was called all kind of dirty names. I was called a bad parent. I was called racist things. I was told you're kind, you're race, you're this. All because her officers who were supposed to be trained actually failed to de-escalate the situation. While we were in that meeting, we asked some of the questions we asked is, what happens if you're fearful? I had a person who had to leave that was in the meeting. She said as a woman, and she actually got pulled over and was unsure about the stop, Sheriff Darnell stated that you would actually call communications, which is what my son did. Her disclaimer was, well, it wasn't late at night and it was dark, but it's still the advice that you would give to someone that actually was scared and didn't know actually what was going on. She stated to me, we wouldn't be here if my son wasn't speeding in a school zone where more people than you probably could imagine actually had speeding violations and citations. My position is, no matter what he did, no matter why he was stopped, there was not a reason in order to pull him out of the vehicle. I asked the question, what if a person was handicapped or deaf and could not actually understand what needed to happen? She stated as long as they put their hands out of the window or their hands were free and clear, then the officer would know that there was no threat of danger. My son's hands were actually holding on to the steering wheel. She stated to me because his hands were rigid on the steering wheel. That could be a reason why. If his hands are rigid on the steering wheel, what would be the threat of imminent danger? His hands were on the steering wheel and rigid, yet again, because he was scared. So things that I've actually asked for is, number one, for her and the school board to get together with junior and seniors in high schools and don't prompt them and tell them what happens at traffic stops. Actually ask them, do they know what's supposed to take place at a traffic stop? That's one of the things I asked. I've asked for specifically, yesterday I was told it was the policy to ask everybody to do a callback. Today I was told it was at the officer's discretion. I've also stated to Sheriff Darnell, even as you speak and think of the officer's discretion, there's bias in that. There's two things that are going on in Alachua County that could only be the reason why black children are arrested 6.8 times more than white kids. I stated it to the reporter earlier and I'm restating it here now. Either there's bias in the system or you're trying to say that there's something that's wrong with black people. It can't be both. And I want it to be made to be very clear. I've conveyed to Sheriff Darnell that from this point, we won't have to have much communication because I've already sought counsel and I've already contacted the ACLU because they'd already let me know that there was issue with the policing here. I like to give the facts. The facts are black people in this county are only 20% of the demographic here, yet they make up 70% of the jail. The fact is that black people are arrested 12% of the time, while white people are arrested 3% of the time. The fact is that black people are 8.8 times more likely to go to jail. I got that information and those facts from Understanding Racial Equity, which was the actual study that was done by the University of Florida and actually done. Also, I like to point out the numbers that we're seeing with our children being incarcerated and arrested, and even as adults, those are the same numbers where the children are being impacted and actually is suspended from school. This is a much larger issue. It's a systemic issue. On that video yesterday, they stated it could have been a teachable moment. Had the sheriff's office took any accountability or responsibility for the officer's failure to de-escalate the situation, we'd actually be having a very different conversation. There'd be a very different viewpoint. I'm saying this to all moms, to any moms, and as an activist, the journey that we're about to go on is not just about my son. It just happens to be that yesterday it happened to my son. It is for all the children here who live in fear of being pulled over by the police. And no matter what they do, it's not the right thing to do. No matter what they do, they're the ones that are made to be accountable instead of the trained professional. And I do take issue with that. My passion is construed as an angry black mom. I'll take that. I have every right in the world to be angry. When my son was pulled out of a car, he didn't know until the video was posted last night that it wasn't a gun. I spoke with Sheriff Darnell. Even when they posted the video, part of the video, because it's not the entire video, but forever speaking with me. Does that sound like anyone who's actually trying to work collectively or as a collaborator in order to come up with solutions? It is not. I was very clear yesterday, and I'm very clear today. I prefer to be a collaborator, but I can be very good at also being an agitator. I'm not going anywhere. I won't be bullied. I won't back down, and I'd like for you all to go review the racist comments that were put on their Facebook page and go see how whoever's running that page actually liked those comments and actually antagonized the people that were supporters. The things that we're specifically asking for, and I was told it would be in a reasonable amount of time, but I wasn't given an exact time frame, is their policy and their protocol for doing the callbacks. I got just a bit of it, but I want more than that. I want the protocol if a person is disabled, if they're handicapped, or even if they just can't speak English and understand. I need the directives in every memo since this was enacted in 2011. Although earlier in the conversation she said it had been for decades. I need to know what things were sent out as clarity. I want all complaints that were in file, but including but not limited to all internal affairs complaints and any patrol regular complaints that originated from traffic stops. I want what can a driver do if they're scared and does not know what to do, since even him calling communications is not the right thing. I want to know all the stops that ended in resisting arrest with or without violence and failure to obey a lawful order. The reason we want this data is because facts matter. Statistics matter. We want to get this data, we want to look at it, we want to disaggregate it. We want to know if the children are black, we want to know if they're white, we want to know if they're Latino. We want to know if they're young, if it's not just children, we want to know if they're old. We want to know what took place and what transpired and why in order to get to the bottom on how we stop it from happening.
My comments are to state that the reason that we are here today is that deputies for the Alachua County Sheriff's Office took action during a violation of speeding within a school zone yesterday at 8 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, June 13th. I have reviewed the video, the entire portion that has to do with the actual traffic stop. It is my position that the deputies acted with great restraint and followed the policy that I have had in place since I have been sheriff. Prior sheriffs have had a very similar policy having to do with the callback method. I stand by that policy because it is in the best interest of citizens, people who may be in the area, and also the law enforcement personnel. Ms. Baker and I spoke about the policy. I've heard what she's had to say. I stand by that policy. I've asked her to direct her anger or displeasure with the policy at me because it is my policy, and I can plan to continue to have the same policy unless I learn of a better method. I asked for recommendations from Ms. Baker regarding to have a better or more safe traffic stop policy. If she has an opportunity to provide that, I would welcome listening to it. The issue of that she brings up, on which we greatly agree, is that there is a systemic problem of racial divide in our country, and I believe that the conversation needs to continue. For many of you all who know what we have done here at the Alachua County Sheriff's Office in concert with many of the other local law enforcement, including the Gainesville Police Department, is we have had training on racial and ethnic disparity. We have had training on how to de-escalate situations, and certainly we can always improve, but I believe that we are ahead of most law enforcement agencies in being sensitive to the issue and attentive to the issue. I stand by the actions of the deputies. I continue to want to share what I believe to be the correct information so that you have the video. You can view the video, you can make your own assessment, you can make your own judgment. But I believe yesterday that there was a rush to judgment in some aspects that caused some misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what transpired. And we'll leave it at that. The video is going to stay. It was my decision to put it on social media, and it will stay, again, in the interest of fairness and transparency for individuals who choose to view the video to make their own opinion. And we will continue to offer awareness videos on social media and through the public media from the standpoint of how best to conduct yourself in a traffic stop. As recently as this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, there was training at Eastside High School, particularly focused at youth regarding traffic stops, how best to be safe in a traffic stop, how to conduct yourself in a traffic stop, and to answer their questions. I have made Ms. Baker aware of that, have invited her to participate in that next year. We host these with the U.S. Attorney's Office every single year for the past several years. We do have a concern of youth in our community. We consider them to be a valuable and critical resource, and we have done made great strides in the area of trying to increase our openness, transparency, and our innovation as we move forward. But the issue yesterday is what it is, and I stand by the actions of the deputies.
Yep, please, and we can do a few questions, and then again we want to make sure that we made all the time available for the two of them to meet, so we can do a few questions, and the sheriff has a follow-on commitment. Ma'am, we'll make our building available for you if you would like to speak with the media afterwards. Absolutely.
Sheriff, did Keon have the right to stay in his car?
He had a right to stay in his car, but there are consequences to that. Under case law throughout the nation, there is the right for law enforcement to be safe in the approach to a vehicle. I believe you may have the case law in your packet, but the courts have given law enforcement the right to be safe in their approach to vehicles during vehicle stops. The callback method is, as best I know, the best method to utilize for the safety of the person or persons in the vehicle, including passengers, and for our law enforcement personnel that are confronted with those situations daily. The percentages of law enforcement who are killed in an approach to a vehicle, either by armed subjects in the vehicle or by passing traffic, is great, and it's increasing. That's the training we receive. We want to create an environment that's safest for the person in the vehicle and for our law enforcement personnel. He stayed in the vehicle. He chose to do that, I believe, under the direction from his mother, he was in conversation with. Had he followed the deputy's instructions to get out of the vehicle, which were repeated and very clear and legitimate and legal under the law, had he followed those instructions, we would not have had the situation escalate to what it was. You will note that even though there was a great time period and a great deal of restraint when the deputies approached the vehicle, he still continued to hold on to the steering wheel, and they did pull him out of the vehicle. That was still within policy and under the law to ensure that they got him into a safe place and that they were safe.
Sheriff, given what has been happening recently between the black community and law enforcement officers, do you think that this policy could cause concern or fear for black drivers?
I believe that in the interest of everyone, and I would ask you to look at the video. You can't tell the race of the individual driving the vehicle prior to the traffic stop. What drew the deputy's attention was that the vehicle was clocked at going over 20 miles over the posted speed limit of 20 miles an hour in a school zone. That's what drew the deputy's attention, and so he had a responsibility to enforce the law and to make a traffic stop, and from that standpoint on, the driver of the vehicle chose not to get out of the vehicle. If someone is disabled or unsure of what to do, if you'll open the door, roll down the window, at least put your hands out so they're clear. These deputies were placed in a situation where the person chose to keep his hands within the vehicle. We didn't know what we had. So again, they followed policy, they followed the instructions I have given them.
Sheriff, you said that the deputies acted with restraint multiple times. Can you tell me and describe to us how they did that? Like what actions they did?
If you'll notice the time period and the number of vocal commands that were given, in the beginning there is some road noise and eventually the deputies used an amplified PA system to make his commands clear and loud enough to be heard. What also is an indication of restraint is the time period. He didn't choose to rush the vehicle, he didn't choose to ram the vehicle, he chose to have some time period go by. And the situation was stabilized. He waited until he had a backup officer there so they both could approach the sides of the vehicle with, again, not knowing if there are any passengers in the vehicle or what was transpiring in the vehicle. The time period and the number of vocal commands that were given, it indicates restraint, indicates patience, and also indicates the legality of the stop and what transpired after.
The time period was about 3 minutes. Is that a normal time from the time of the traffic stop until time where you can pull someone out of a vehicle? Is that like a normal time period? Is that like the time period that you guys try to keep it within?
I candidly don't know what the time period was. I haven't looked at it as it being 3 minutes. It seemed longer to me. But I mean, if we hold our breath for 3 minutes, it tends to be a long period of time. Again, in the other part of your question, I don't know because I don't have a comparative data of how long that takes. Every circumstance is different. That's why the law is broad and gives the direction that and the guidance and direction that it does. Every circumstance is different. In this particular situation, looking back at it, I still stand by the actions of the deputy and do believe that they used great restraint and were very patient in regards to the actions that they took and were legal in the actions that they took to again provide greater safety and for the greater good of enforcing speed in a school zone. So in answer to your question, I don't know what the time frame was, and I don't know if that's normal or within range. Because again, every circumstance is different, so you can't write a policy that's going to be specific enough to cover every single circumstance, which brings us to the discussion and people having different perspectives and different opinions about what transpired.
And what was the reasoning behind posting the video? And do you guys monitor the comment section for any kind of, racist remarks or anything like that to kind of like hide them so it doesn't do any further damage?
The reason for posting of the video is very clear to me, and I again accept total responsibility for that decision, and I still stand by it. In order to get the information, the factual information out, showing the video of the traffic stop helped to answer questions that may have been raised by earlier social media that spoke to the issue and wasn't intended to have any commentary with it from one stance or the other. What the facts were presented as known and as shown on the video. How people interpreted that, what judgment they will make is for the individual who view it.
Sheriff, in response to this policy, it seems like there are a lot of people who are unaware that this policy even exists.
All the more reason for us to get information out regarding what to do in a traffic stop. Again, the training that was held at Eastside this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it was in the Gainesville Sun on the front page of their region section. It's a good overview. That's one way we want to get the education and awareness out. We will do more of that. We have done that in past years. We don't do it every minute of the day. People would become numb to it if we did. But certainly it is something that we do try to educate and raise awareness. Different law enforcement agencies have different policies and practice, but this has been a policy and practice at the Alachua County Sheriff's Office for decades, and also since I have been in office and I support it. I believe it's the best method for the safety of everyone involved.
Thank you, Sheriff. Do we have a question for Ms. Baker? The sheriff will be here for one of those, and then ma'am, we'll continue to give you use of the room if you'd like to, if you want to ask.
Actually, if you have any other, I've got another commitment to go to any other questions from me, otherwise I'll turn it over to Ms. Baker.
And I can answer some of your social media questions specifically as the account is monitored through the Public Information Office. So,
Any questions?
any questions for, or jointly? If not, the sheriff does have another commitment.
Thank you, Ms. Baker, thank you.
Thank you.